They called it a warm-up exercise. 10 Navy SEALs against one woman. The Pentagon's latest diversity experiment, they said. The betting started before she even stepped into the ring. How quickly would she tap out? Which operator would make her quit? The laughter echoed through the training hangar as the first SEAL entered the circle. No one noticed her pupils dilating, the subtle shift in her stance, the small scar behind her ear. No one was laughing 90 seconds later. By the third opponent, the room had fallen completely silent. By the fifth, they understood their mistake. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story intrigues you, consider subscribing for more untold military narratives. Dawn breaks over the Naval Special Warfare Development Group facility in Virginia Beach, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold. A light mist clings to the obstacle courses where America's most elite warriors train, creating an almost mystical atmosphere in the early morning light. Inside the main training hangar, fluorescent lights buzz overhead, illuminating the mat-covered floor where 40 Navy SEALs stand in formation, bodies honed to physical perfection through years of the most grueling training on Earth. Commander Thaddeus Blackwell strides to the front of the formation, his weathered face betraying no emotion. At 45, Blackwell is a legend among legends, a 25-year veteran with 11 combat deployments and a chest full of medals he never displays. The scars on his forearms tell more about his service than his classified personnel file ever could. At ease, he barks, and the SEALs shift their stance slightly, eyes forward, hands clasped behind their backs. Blackwell clears his throat. Gentlemen, today we have a visitor from Washington. He gestures toward the entrance where a woman stands at perfect attention. The Pentagon has sent us their latest experiment. Lieutenant Zafira Kairos stands motionless near the door, her olive-drab t-shirt and standard-issue training pants revealing little about her physique. Neither particularly tall nor physically imposing, she appears almost ordinary compared to the muscled warriors before her. Her dark hair is secured in a regulation bun, her face devoid of makeup, her expression unreadable. Lieutenant Kairos has been fast-tracked through selection despite lacking traditional qualifications. Blackwell continues, making no attempt to hide the disapproval in his voice. Apparently, someone upstairs thinks we need to diversify our operational capabilities. Several operators exchange knowing glances. A few don't bother hiding their smirks. In the back row, Petty Officer Axel Riker, a mountain of a man with close-cropped blonde hair, whispers something to his neighbor that causes a ripple of suppressed laughter. Today we'll conduct a simple assessment, Blackwell says, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Lieutenant Kairos will face 10 of our operators in succession. Consider it a warm-up exercise before we begin actual training. As Zafira walks toward the sparring circle in the center of the room, the camera would linger on a small surgical scar behind her right ear, barely visible beneath her hairline. For just a split second, her eyes unfocus, a fleeting memory passing across her consciousness. Sterile white walls, medical equipment, her own eyes opening under harsh lights, voices murmuring scientific jargon in the background. The moment passes, and she takes her position in the center of the circle, feet shoulder-width apart, hands loose at her sides. The operators jovially argue over who gets to go first, making side bets on how quickly she'll tap out. Lieutenant Commander Wolf Cadmos, the team's hand-to-hand combat specialist, is particularly vocal. 50 says she doesn't last 30 seconds with any of us, he announces to general agreement. Make it 100, adds Chief Orion Taurus, and another 100 says she's crying before the third round. No one notices the woman in civilian clothes watching from the shadows near the back of the hangar. Dr. Isolde Varn stands perfectly still, her tablet in hand, making occasional notes as she observes the proceedings with clinical detachment. Her presence is neither announced nor acknowledged, yet her eyes miss nothing. Blackwell consults a clipboard. Riker, you're up first. Remember, this is an assessment, not a beatdown. Keep it professional. Petty Officer Axel Riker, 6'4" and built like a freight train, steps into the circle. With 17 years of special operations experience and a background in collegiate wrestling, he's a formidable opponent for anyone, let alone the unassuming woman before him. Don't worry, Lieutenant, he says with a grin that doesn't reach his eyes. I'll try not to send you to medical on your first day. Zafira remains silent, her stance shifting almost imperceptibly. Something in her eyes changes, a subtle sharpening of focus, but the operators, expecting weakness, fail to notice. Blackwell blows a whistle. Begin! Riker lunges forward with surprising speed for a man his size, aiming to grapple and demonstrate his superior strength. Zafira appears to stumble backward awkwardly, her movements seeming uncoordinated and panicked. Laughter erupts from the watching SEALs. 10 seconds tops, someone calls out. Riker presses his advantage, closing the distance with a textbook takedown move. At the last possible moment, Zafira shifts her weight, and instead of falling backward, she redirects Riker's momentum just enough that he slightly overextends. The move is so subtle that most observers miss it entirely, seeing only that Riker's attack didn't land as cleanly as expected. Frowning, Riker resets and circles, more cautious now. Zephyra's movements still appear uncoordinated, almost amateurish, but somehow she remains just out of his reach. After 30 seconds of this dance, murmurs of confusion begin to replace the laughter. Just take her down already, Cadmos calls out impatiently. Riker, now visibly frustrated, commits to a more aggressive approach. He feints left, then drives right. A combination that has worked countless times in combat and training. Zephyra moves to block the feint, apparently falling for it, leaving herself open to the real attack. But when Riker's right hand shoots out to grab her, she isn't there. With a movement too fast to follow clearly, she has shifted position, and Riker's momentum carries him slightly off balance. Before he can recover, Zafira's hand strikes his wrist at precisely the point where nerve meets bone. Riker's fingers instantly go numb, and as he instinctively pulls back, she follows with a precisely placed finger jab to a pressure point on his neck. Riker drops to one knee, momentarily disoriented, his right arm temporarily useless. The hanger falls silent. Blackwell's whistle cuts through the tension. Round complete. Forge, you're up. As Riker walks back to the line, shaking his arm to restore circulation, his expression is one of bewilderment rather than humiliation. He looks at his hand as if it has betrayed him, then back at the woman who somehow managed to neutralize him with minimal effort. Lieutenant Quentin Forge steps into the circle next, a technical fighting specialist known for his calculated approach. Where Riker relies on power, Forge depends on precision and technique. He's taken gold in international martial arts competitions and trained with masters across Asia before joining the Navy. Interesting technique, Lieutenant, Forge says, his voice neutral as he assumes a traditional fighting stance. Let's see what else you've got. Zephyra's face remains impassive, her own stance appearing much less refined than Forge's textbook posture. As the whistle blows, Forge circles her, analyzing her movement patterns, looking for weaknesses. Her responses seem stiff, almost robotic, nothing like the fluid grace of an experienced fighter. Forge probes with a series of light strikes, testing her defenses. Zephyra blocks some, awkwardly avoids others, and takes a glancing blow to her shoulder that draws more mockery from the observers. "This is what they're sending us now?" someone calls out. Forge, however, is not smiling. Something about the encounter feels wrong to him, though he can't quite identify what. He increases the speed and complexity of his attacks, a combination that should overwhelm an opponent of Zafira's apparent skill level. Yet somehow she remains upright. Her defense is just adequate enough to prevent serious damage. It's as if she's calculating the minimum response necessary to each attack. No wasted energy, no unnecessary movement. After 60 seconds of increasingly intense exchanges, Forge commits to a finishing move, a sweeping leg technique, followed by a restraint hold that would end the match decisively. As his leg scythes toward hers, Zafira finally moves with purpose. Her block is perfect, her counter-strike lightning fast, striking nerve clusters that temporarily paralyze Forge's attacking leg. As he falters, she applies precise pressure to his extended wrist, and Forge finds himself on the mat, arm immobilized in a joint lock that appeared to materialize out of nowhere. The whistle blows again. Forge rises, rubbing his wrist, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. "Chief Taurus," Blackwell calls, his own voice now tinged with curiosity rather than contempt. "You're up." As Chief Orion Taurus, renowned for his speed, approaches for the third round, the camera catches a subtle change in Zephyra. Her pupils dilate and contract rapidly, adjusting to some internal calculation. Her fingers tap a strange pattern against her thigh. as if inputting data into an invisible keyboard. Another flash of memory crosses her consciousness: underwater training tanks, electrodes attached to her temples, multiple women in identical medical gowns performing synchronized movements under the watchful eyes of technicians. Taurus is already moving as the whistle sounds, exploiting his reputation for lightning-fast attacks. What happens next is difficult for the observers to process. Zephyra moves with sudden, machine-like precision, meeting Taurus's attack with a series of counters that seem to anticipate his every move. Within 15 seconds, Taurus is on the ground, a precision strike to his solar plexus, leaving him gasping for air. As Taurus rolls away clutching his midsection, Blackwell's phone buzzes in his pocket. The text message reads, "Operation Nemesis asset activated. Stand down." His expression shifts from curious to concerned as he looks up sharply at Zephyra, who now stands at the center of the circle, her posture subtly different, more balanced, more dangerous. "Lieutenant Commander Cadmos," Blackwell calls, but there's a warning in his voice that wasn't there before. "Your turn." Lieutenant Commander Wolf Cadmos enters the ring with the confidence of a man who has never lost a sparring match. At 39, he is the DevGru's most decorated close-quarters combat specialist, with a background that includes Olympic-level judo and advanced training from Israeli Defense Forces. His body bears the scars of countless real-world operations, each one a story of survival against impossible odds. "Let's see what you've got, Lieutenant," he says, circling Zephyra with predatory focus. The room has grown tense, the earlier mockery replaced by a wary silence. Something changes in Zephyra's posture, a transformation so subtle that most miss it entirely. Her previously awkward stance shifts into perfect balance. Her eyes, once seemingly unfocused, now track Cadmos with machine-like precision, cataloging micro-expressions and weight distributions that would be imperceptible to normal human senses. Blackwell steps forward, mouth opening to halt the match, but he's too late. Cadmos attacks with a practiced combination that has dropped operators twice his size. A lightning-fast sequence of strikes followed by a takedown move perfected over decades of combat. In a blur of movement that seems to defy human capability, Zephyra redirects his momentum, strikes 3 pressure points in rapid succession, and steps away as Cadmos collapses to the mat, his nervous system temporarily short-circuited. The hangar falls completely silent, 40 elite warriors stunned into speechlessness. Cadmos lies motionless except for his eyes, which blink rapidly in confusion and alarm. He tries to rise but finds his limbs unresponsive, as if his body has forgotten how to receive signals from his brain. "Next," Zephyr says, her voice calm and measured, utterly at odds with the extraordinary display of skill she just demonstrated. Blackwell looks down at his phone, then back at Zephyra, clearly torn between protocol and the unfolding situation. Before he can make a decision, 2 more operators step into the ring together, instinctively understanding that individual approaches have proven inadequate. Senior Chief Petty Officer Darius Mercer and Lieutenant Junior Grade Rafferty Quinn position themselves on opposite sides of Zephyra, a pincer movement designed to divide her attention. Both men are combat-hardened veterans with multiple tours in the world's most dangerous environments. "Begin," Blackwell says, his voice tight with tension. Mercer and Quinn attack simultaneously, their movements perfectly synchronized after years of training together. It should be impossible for a single opponent to counter such a coordinated assault. Zephyra moves with fluid precision, her body seemingly operating on a different temporal plane. Where before her movements appeared stiff and robotic, now they flow like water, each action bleeding seamlessly into the next. She slips between Mercer's outstretched arms, redirects Quinn's momentum into Mercer's path, and delivers a series of strikes too fast to follow with the naked eye. Both men hit the mat within 3 seconds of each other, conscious but incapacitated. "What in the name of—" someone whispers from the sidelines, not finishing the thought. The remaining SEALs exchange glances, a wordless communication passing between them. 3 more step forward together, forming a triangle around Zephyra. They attack as one, a coordinated assault that would overwhelm any normal combatant through sheer numerical advantage. Zephyra dismantles them with brutal efficiency, her movements now openly superhuman in their speed and precision. She anticipates each attack before it fully forms. exploits weaknesses invisible to the untrained eye, and neutralizes 3 of the world's deadliest warriors as if they were academy cadets on their first day of basic training. "She's reading our physiological responses," mutters a downed operator, nursing a dislocated shoulder. "She knows what we're going to do before we do." The last 2 volunteers enter the ring together, approaching with extreme caution, having witnessed the fate of their teammates. They circle warily, feinting and withdrawing, reluctant to commit to an attack pattern that has proven so disastrously ineffective. Zafira stands perfectly centered, her breathing even, not a drop of sweat visible on her brow. When she finally moves, it's with such explosive speed that several observers later swear they didn't see her cross the distance. The 2 SEALs are on the ground before they can react. Precision strikes to nerve clusters, leaving them temporarily paralyzed. 7 of America's most elite warriors lie incapacitated around the sparring circle. The remaining operators stand frozen in disbelief, their worldview fundamentally altered in the span of minutes. Finally, Commander Blackwell himself steps into the ring, unbuckling his sidearm and handing it to a nearby operator. His face is grim, the earlier contempt replaced by focused determination. This is no longer about humiliation or assessment. It's about understanding exactly what they're dealing with. Blackwell draws a combat knife from an ankle sheath, a carbon fiber blade with a wicked edge. In close quarters, against an opponent who has demonstrated supernatural hand-to-hand capabilities, the knife represents a tactical escalation, a test of whether her skills extend to armed combat. "Lieutenant Kairos," he says formally, "demonstrate your proficiency against an armed opponent." Zafira inclines her head slightly, the first sign of respect she has shown since entering the facility. Her eyes track the knife with unnatural focus, pupils contracting and expanding as she calculates trajectories and response patterns. Blackwell attacks with the controlled aggression of a career operator, the knife an extension of his arm, weaving patterns designed to create openings and force defensive errors. He is no longer testing, he is fighting with the full measure of his considerable skill. Zafira disarms and incapacitates him in seconds, her movements a blur of precisely applied physics and biomechanical exploitation. The knife clatters to the mat, and Blackwell finds himself immobilized in a hold that applies pressure to nerve clusters he didn't know existed. The pain is exquisite in its precision, intense without being debilitating, a demonstration rather than a punishment. Standing over him, she whispers words only he can hear. "Project Nemesis sends regards. Assessment complete." Then she releases him and steps back, resuming her stance at the center of the circle, surrounded by the fallen elite of America's special operations community. Dr. Isolde Varn steps forward from the shadows, her tablet tucked under one arm, addressing the stunned room. "Gentlemen, meet the future of special operations." Her voice carries the clinical detachment of a scientist discussing a successful experiment. "Lieutenant Kairos is the product of a classified military program you now have the privilege of witnessing. Neural enhancements allow her to process combat situations 400% faster than standard operators. She can identify and exploit physiological weaknesses instantaneously by reading micro-expressions, pupil dilation, and perspiration patterns imperceptible to normal human senses." Varn allows herself a small smile as she surveys the downed operators. "She wasn't being tested by you. She was evaluating your vulnerabilities." The SEALs look at Zafira with newfound respect, mixed with unease. She stands perfectly still, face once again impassive, as if the extraordinary display of skill had never happened. "Project Nemesis," Varn continues, "creates enhanced female operators for missions where male operators cannot infiltrate. Cultural barriers in many regions prevent men from accessing certain spaces or interacting with female populations. These environments have traditionally been intelligence black holes. Lieutenant Kairos and her counterparts can move freely in these spaces while possessing combat capabilities that exceed your own." A medic kneels beside Cadmos, who is finally regaining motor control, his fingers twitching as sensation returns to his extremities. Around the room, other operators help their downed comrades to sitting positions, checking pupils and testing reflexes. The techniques Lieutenant Kairos employed are designed to be temporarily incapacitating rather than permanently damaging, Varney explains. Full motor function will return within 15 minutes, with no lasting effects. Consider this a valuable learning experience about the dangers of underestimating an opponent based on appearance or gender. Blackwell rises to his feet, straightening his uniform with military precision. His expression is unreadable, but the earlier contempt has vanished, replaced by something that might be professional respect. "Dr. Varn," he says formally, "in the future, I would appreciate advance notice when my training facility is being used to field test classified weapon systems." Varn's smile tightens. "Lieutenant Kairos is an operator, Commander, not a weapon system, and your response to her arrival was precisely what we needed to measure. Had you been briefed, the data would have been contaminated." "What data, exactly?" asks Forge, now sitting on the edge of the mat, rubbing circulation back into his wrist. "Unconscious bias," Varna replies. "The automatic assumption that a female operator represents a lowering of standards rather than a specialized capability. That assumption creates a tactical blind spot that Lieutenant Kairos is specifically trained to exploit. What you witnessed today was not a display of superior physical strength, but rather of specialized neural enhancements that allow for the identification and exploitation of vulnerabilities at superhuman speed." Zephyra remains silent throughout this exchange, her posture perfect, her expression revealing nothing. Only her eyes move, scanning the room constantly, cataloging details with machine-like efficiency. "I have questions," Blackwell says, his tone making it clear this is not a request. "I imagine you do," Varna replies, "and I'll answer what I can within the constraints of operational security. Lieutenant Kairos will remain with your unit for the next 6 weeks as part of an integration exercise. During that time, you'll learn how to operate alongside Nemesis assets effectively." She glances at her watch. "But first, I suggest your medical team evaluate your operators. While the techniques used are non-permanent, some may experience disorientation or nausea as their nervous systems reset. As if on cue, one of the downed SEALs lurches to his feet and stumbles toward a trash can, emptying the contents of his stomach. Others sit with heads between knees, breathing deeply as their bodies recover from neurological disruption, unlike anything they've experienced in training or combat. Zephyra finally moves, approaching the nearest operator with mechanical efficiency. She kneels beside him, checking his pulse with clinical detachment. "Vagal response," she says, her voice flat. "It will pass in approximately 73 seconds. Breathe through your nose, exhale through your mouth." The operator looks up at her, his expression a complex mixture of wariness and curiosity. "What did you do to me?" "Targeted pressure to the vagus nerve cluster," she explains, demonstrating the location on her own neck without actually applying pressure. "When stimulated correctly, it creates a cascade effect through the parasympathetic nervous system, temporarily overriding voluntary muscle control." Around the room, other operators are regaining their composure, watching this exchange with intense interest. The mockery and contempt have vanished entirely, replaced by professional curiosity, and, in some cases, grudging admiration. Blackwell turns to Varn. "My office, now, and bring your security clearance documentation. I want to know exactly what you brought into my facility." As they leave, Riker approaches Zephyra, moving with the caution of someone approaching an undetonated explosive. "That was, without question, the most impressive thing I've ever seen," he admits. "And I once watched a man hold off 30 insurgents with a broken rifle and a combat knife." Zephyra turns to him, her movements precise and economical. For the first time, a flicker of something almost human crosses her features, not quite a smile, but a softening of her mechanical demeanor. "Thank you, Petty Officer Riker," she responds. "Your technique was fundamentally sound. The outcome was determined by processing speed, not skill differential." Riker blinks, processing this strange compliment. "So, you're saying that in a fair fight, without your enhancements, I might stand a chance?" "No," Zephyra replies, her voice matter of fact. "I was engineered to ensure fair fights never occur." The medical team moves efficiently through the training hangar, attending to the downed operators with professional detachment. Most are already regaining full motor control, though several still exhibit symptoms of disorientation and nervous system disruption. Zephyra moves among them, her knowledge of the precise conditions she inflicted, making her unexpectedly valuable to the medical staff. "Pressure here," she instructs a corpsman treating Chief Taurus, indicating a point on his neck. It will accelerate nervous system recovery by approximately 27%. The corpsman hesitates, glancing toward his superior for confirmation before applying the technique. Taurus's eyes widen as sensation floods back into his extremities. "How do you know exactly where to press?" the corpsman asks, studying the spot with professional curiosity. "Comprehensive knowledge of human anatomy is baseline training for Nemesis operatives," Zephyra explains, her tone clinical rather than boastful. "We are required to memorize the location and function of 347 distinct nerve clusters, along with techniques to stimulate or suppress each one." Across the room, Commander Blackwell emerges from his office with Dr. Varn. His expression has shifted from anger to a more complex mixture of concern and reluctant acceptance. He surveys the room, noting the gradual recovery of his team and the unexpected role Zephyra has taken in facilitating that recovery. "Listen up," he announces, his voice cutting through the murmured conversations. "As of this moment, Lieutenant Kairos's presence and capabilities are classified top-secret code word. What happened here today does not leave this room. The existence of Project Nemesis is not to be acknowledged or discussed outside this facility." The operators nod in understanding, the culture of secrecy ingrained in their professional DNA. For the next 6 weeks, Lieutenant Kairos will integrate with our unit for joint training exercises. You will treat her with the same professional respect you would any fellow operator. Dr. Varn will remain on site as technical advisor and medical liaison. He pauses, scanning the room. "Questions?" Forge raises a hand. "Sir, are there others like Lieutenant Kairos?" All eyes turn to Varn, who measures her response carefully. Project Nemesis currently has 17 active operatives with varying enhancement profiles. Lieutenant Kairos represents our standard combat configuration. "Standard?" Cadmos asks incredulously. "There's nothing standard about what we just witnessed." "By standard, I mean her enhancements focus primarily on combat applications," Varn clarifies. "Other Nemesis operatives have modifications optimized for different operational requirements, including advanced linguistic processing, enhanced memory reconstruction, or accelerated cognitive functions for intelligence analysis." Riker, now fully recovered, steps forward. "With respect, ma'am, what exactly are these enhancements? We talking mechanical implants, genetic modification, or what?" Varn glances at Zephyra, who gives an almost imperceptible nod. "A combination of approaches," Varn explains. "Neural mesh integration at key junctions in the peripheral nervous system, biochemical adjustments to enhance neurotransmitter efficiency, and targeted genetic modifications to specific regions of the brain responsible for processing sensory input and motor response." The technical explanation does little to diminish the almost supernatural quality of what the SEALs witnessed. Several operators exchange uneasy glances. "Does it hurt?" asks a young SEAL, pointing to his own head, referencing the neural enhancements. A shadow passes over Zephyra's face, the first genuine emotion many of them have seen from her. "Constantly," she admits, "but you get used to it. The neural interface creates what your medical professionals would classify as chronic pain. We are trained to compartmentalize and function despite it." "What else did they modify?" another operator asks. "Everything," she says simply. "Memory implantation, pain suppression, accelerated healing, enhanced visual processing. We can never have normal lives again. That was part of the agreement." The blunt assessment creates a momentary silence, the operators confronting the reality of what such modifications would mean. "Agreement?" Blackwell asks sharply. "You volunteered for this?" Zephyra meets his gaze directly. "All Nemesis operatives are volunteers, Commander. The program protocols require informed consent. We were fully briefed on both the capabilities we would gain and the sacrifices required." "What kind of sacrifices?" Riker asks, his earlier wariness now tempered with something like concern. "The modifications are permanent and progressive," she explains. "Our neural architecture continues to adapt and evolve in response to the implants. The long-term prognosis is unclear. No Nemesis operative has survived beyond 7 years post-enhancement." This revelation sends a chill through the room. The operators, all intimately familiar with mortality and sacrifice, nonetheless struggle to comprehend voluntarily accepting a definitive expiration date. 7 years, Cadmos repeats quietly. And how long have you been enhanced, Lieutenant? 5 years, 4 months, 17 days. Zephyr responds with machine-like precision. The implications hang in the air, unspoken but understood by all. If the pattern holds, Zephyra has less than 2 years remaining. Blackwell clears his throat, reclaiming command of the situation. Lieutenant Kairos is here to share her expertise and help us develop joint operational capabilities. I expect every one of you to put aside any preconceptions and approach this training opportunity with the professionalism this unit is known for. He turns to Zephyra. Lieutenant, perhaps you could begin by explaining the tactical applications of your enhancements in a combat scenario. Something shifts in Zephyra's demeanor, a subtle transformation from clinical detachment to professional engagement. She moves to the center of the training area with fluid grace. The primary tactical advantage of a Nemesis operative is the ability to process combat scenarios at significantly accelerated rates, she begins. Where a standard operator might identify 3 or 4 potential threats in a given environment, I can simultaneously track and prioritize up to 27 distinct threat vectors. She gestures to Riker and Forge. Petty Officer, Lieutenant, if you would assist with a demonstration. The two men step forward, still moving with slight caution, but professional curiosity overriding their earlier wariness. Attack from any angle, using any technique, she instructs. I will demonstrate threat assessment and neutralization protocols. What follows transforms the atmosphere in the room, from lingering suspicion to professional admiration. Zephyra walks the operators through her combat methodology, explaining each enhancement and its practical application. She demonstrates techniques that exploit human physiological weaknesses with surgical precision, then teaches countermeasures that might be employed against similarly enhanced opponents. Hours pass as the initial demonstration evolves into an impromptu masterclass in advanced combat tactics. The operators, elite warriors all, find themselves in the unfamiliar position of novice students, absorbing knowledge that challenges everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. The key limitation of your current hand-to-hand combat training, Zephyr explains as she corrects Taurus's technique, is that it assumes relatively equal processing speeds between combatants. When facing an opponent with enhanced neural architecture, this assumption becomes a critical vulnerability. She repositions his arm slightly. This adjustment reduces your telegraphing by approximately 63%, making your movements significantly harder to predict and counter. Taurus tests the modified stance, his expression thoughtful. This feels more efficient, he acknowledges, less wasted energy. By late afternoon, the initial shock and wariness have given way to intense professional focus. The operators work in small groups, practicing the modified techniques under Zephyra's guidance. Occasionally, Dr. Varn interjects with technical explanations of the underlying neurological principles, but mostly she observes from the periphery, making notes on her tablet. Commander Blackwell watches the transformation with grudging approval. Whatever his personal feelings about Project Nemesis and the ethical questions it raises, he cannot deny the tactical value of what Zephyra brings to his unit. As the training session winds down, Blackwell calls for attention. That's enough for today. Standard PT at 0600 tomorrow, followed by joint tactical simulations with Lieutenant Kairos at 0900. As the operators disperse toward the showers, Riker approaches Zephyra, who stands alone, reviewing data on a specialized tablet. Lieutenant, he says, holding an ice pack to his jaw, where an earlier demonstration had connected with more force than intended. I owe you an apology. We all do. For the first time, Zephyra's expression softens noticeably. Your techniques were sound, Petty Officer. It's not a fair comparison. Fair or not, I judged you before I knew what you were capable of, Riker admits. That was unprofessional of me. Zephyra studies him, her enhanced senses cataloging micro-expressions that reveal his sincerity. Apology accepted, she says simply, though the initial response was expected and accounted for in the assessment protocols. So, this whole thing, the Pentagon sending you here without warning, the setup with the sparring matches, it was all a test, Riker asks. A multi-phase evaluation, she corrects. We needed to assess how traditional special operations units would react to Nemesis operatives under battlefield conditions. Initial hostility followed by integration is the optimal outcome. And if we hadn't come around, if we'd maintained the hostility, a flicker of something cold passes behind her eyes. There were contingency protocols. She doesn't elaborate, and Riker doesn't press the point. Instead, he changes direction. Some of us are heading to O'Malley's tonight. It's a tradition after training. You're welcome to join if you're allowed to socialize. The invitation clearly catches Zafira off guard. For a moment, the mechanical precision of her responses falters, revealing something more human underneath. I don't have specific restrictions against socialization, she says, the slight hesitation humanizing her further. Though I should warn you that my biochemical modifications include filtration systems that render alcohol consumption ineffective. Riker grins. Perfect. We need a designated driver anyway. 6 months later, the DevGru training facility hosts a different kind of gathering. In the same hangar where Zafira first demonstrated her capabilities, an integrated team of SEALs and newly revealed Nemesis operators run through final preparations for their first joint deployment. Zafira, now wearing the distinctive insignia of a Joint Special Operations team leader, reviews tactical overlays with Riker, Forge, and 2 female operators identified only by code names, Artemis and Athena. Extraction Point Alpha has been compromised, she informs them, updating the holographic display with new intelligence. We'll proceed to Gamma instead, using this route to avoid recently identified surveillance systems. The team absorbs the changes without comment, the months of integrated training having forged them into a seamless unit that transcends their different origins and capabilities. Brief mission footage on nearby monitors shows their previous operation, a hostage extraction in a region where cultural restrictions would have made an all-male team conspicuous and vulnerable. The Nemesis operators moved freely through female-only spaces, gathering intelligence and neutralizing threats while the SEAL elements secured exfiltration routes. The mission resulted in the successful recovery of 3 hostages with 0 casualties. She never asked for recognition. Riker's voice narrates over the footage for a training documentary with restricted circulation. None of them did. They gave up their past, their future, even parts of their humanity, not for glory, but because someone had to. The footage cuts to a classified ceremony in a nondescript government conference room. Zafira, standing at attention in formal uniform, receives a medal that will never appear in any public record. The decoration is pinned by a senior military official whose face is digitally obscured. Dr. Varn stands in the background, her expression a mixture of pride and something like regret. In the present, Commander Blackwell enters the hangar, approaching the integrated team with purpose. Intel update, he announces. Priority target confirmed at location Bravo. Wheels up in 30. As the team moves toward the waiting transport, a young female officer enters the facility, her posture radiating nervousness beneath her attempt at military bearing. Several junior SEALs nearby exchange knowing glances, one making a quiet remark that causes others to snicker. The door at the far end of the hangar opens, and Zafira enters. The effect is immediate and dramatic. The SEALs snap to attention, all trace of mockery vanishing instantly. The atmosphere shifts from casual derision to focused professionalism in the space of a heartbeat. Zafira approaches the new arrival with a small but genuine smile, the mechanical precision of her earlier days now balanced with hard-won humanity. "Ensign Lyra Kestrel?" she asks, though her enhanced memory means she already knows the answer. "Yes, ma'am," the young officer responds, standing straighter. "Welcome to DevGru. I understand you're our newest Nemesis integration candidate." "Yes, ma'am. I completed preliminary assessment last month." Zafira studies her briefly, enhanced senses cataloging details invisible to normal human perception. "The first day is always the hardest," she says, her tone softening slightly. "But I think you'll find things have changed somewhat since I arrived." She glances around the hangar, at the SEALs who now treat her with unquestioned respect, at the integrated team preparing for a mission that would be impossible without the unique capabilities of Nemesis operatives. "Ready to work, Ensign?" she asks. Kestrel nods firmly. "Absolutely, ma'am." Zafira leads her toward the training area, past operators who now view the Nemesis program not as a Pentagon diversity experiment, but as an essential evolution in special operations capability. The path she walks is one she carved herself, through skepticism and prejudice, with skill and sacrifice. No one is laughing anymore.